So Edgar Berlanga moved to 21-0 on the weekend, 16 by way of, with a 12-round UD over Jason Quigley on his Matchroom debut. Now I've seen quite a few of Berlanga's fights now. The first person who alerted me to his existence was Boxing on the Edge. Shout out to him. Go check out his channel. Go check out a couple of his channels actually. He's got a music channel as well because he's a producer and obviously his boxing channel. So yeah, shout out to Boxing on the Edge. He lives in New York, so he told me about Berlanga. Must have been a couple years ago now. He said that other than Teofimo Lopez, Berlanga is the biggest name in New York boxing. In fact, he might even have a bigger following than Teofimo Lopez in New York. I'm not sure, but Berlanga is Puerto Rican, and there are a lot more Puerto Ricans in New York than Hondurans. Obviously, Teofimo Lopez is from Honduras. So he told me about him and said he's got a big following and what have you. So I went to go check him out. Been watching his fights since. And just like he told me, the guy is limited. He doesn't really look like someone who's going to be elite. Now, some fighters surprise you because they can look a bit shaky early on in their career, but then they can really mature and develop into something special. Is it possible that that could happen to Belanga? I guess anything's possible. But yeah, I just have to say it as I see it. And he doesn't, to me, look like someone who's going to be this major force at world level. Belanga, since I've been watching him, has been dropped. He's been hurt on several occasions. His defense looks poor. And he just lacks the sharpness of a top level fighter. And you know what I mean by the sharpness. You look at someone like Gennady Golovkin, he doesn't have fast hands. His feet are relatively quick, but his hands are not fast. I'm talking about prime Golovkin here. But you could tell that Golovkin had that sharpness of a world level fighter in terms of his decision making, in terms of reacting to things, offensively and defensively. His mind worked quick, even if his hands didn't move quick. And when your mind works quick, you can time things. So you can overcome somebody's speed with timing. With Edgar Berlanga, he doesn't have Golovkin's timing. He doesn't have Golovkin's eyes where he sees things and knows what to throw and when to throw it. Another thing he doesn't have, and the reason I'm comparing him to Golovkin is because stylistically, Berlanga, at least all the time I've been watching him, has been a pressure fighter. Comes forward, tries to get his big shots off. But he doesn't have a Gennady Golovkin style chin, right? And who does, by the way, because Golovkin, an iron jaw, literally, the guy's never hit the canvas. So, yeah, he doesn't have Golovkin's chin, been hurt a bunch of times that I've been watching him, been down, and down heavily too. And yeah, with Golovkin, you can criticize his defense and say in certain fights he gets hit too much. But there are other fights where he decides not to get hit and he can do it. He's got the boxing skills to fall back on. Whereas with Belanga, I mean, he isn't fighting a great level of opposition at this point. I mean, you look at the guys he's fought, uh, Roma, Alexis Angulo, Steve Rolls, Marcelo Corsese. I'm butchering these names, I'm sure. That's the fight I saw him get dropped in. And he got dropped hard in that fight. That was a real heavy knockdown in the ninth round. Credit to him for getting up and continuing and winning the fight, although there are many who believe he didn't deserve to win that fight. And it wasn't just that knockdown, by the way. He was being caught with some massive punches clean earlier on in the fight. And I'm not saying that Berlanga has a weak chin, by the way. I'm not saying he's got a glass jaw. I'd say his jaw is maybe average. It's the fact he gets hit clean so often, and gets hit so flush that is the biggest concern, more so than the strength of his chin. And I don't think his chin is great. And I'll talk about his chin in comparison to another middleweight slash super middleweight in just a moment. But anyway, he went in there against Jason Quigley, a guy who got blasted out in 2 rounds by Demetrius Andrade. I think it was 2 rounds. Andrade, not a massive puncher, but a very fast starter, a sharp puncher, Andrade, and a notoriously fast starter. Andrade usually comes out very quick in the opening rounds, kind of like Amir Khan used to back in Khan's prime. Khan would come out like a bull in a china shop for the first couple rounds, drop Marcus Maidana early, drop Lamont Peterson early. Who else did Amir Khan drop early? Oh God, I forget all of the names now, but Khan would usually start fast and do well early, but then he'd have to start settling into a boxing routine if he didn't manage to get the opponent out of there and sometimes start running around the ring. Demetrius Andrade is similar. If he can't get you out early, he's going to have to move around and maybe run a little bit. So yeah, he starts fast, but a pressure fighter like Belanga, you would want to see him get rid of Jason Quigley inside the distance. Not necessarily as fast as Demetrius Andrade, because Andrade is a much quicker fighter than Belanga. But you would want Belanga to break down a Jason Quigley and get him out of there at some point if he's really going to be formidable with this style of his at world level. But he didn't manage to do that. He did drop Jason Quigley. He was down in the third, in the fifth, and twice in the 12th. One of the knockdowns, I think it was in the 12th, didn't look like a knockdown at all to me, but the other knockdowns seemed to be legit. Certainly the first knockdown was a good right hand where Jason Quigley was leaning to his own right, I think it was, in the corner and down, kind of like down and to the right. And Belanga came over with a right hand chopping down on Quigley's head and managed to drop him. So that was a good knockdown, the way that Belanga changed the trajectory of the punch to make sure it landed when he had his guy in the corner. And yeah, the pattern of the fight was Belanga coming forward, applying some kind of pressure, but not nearly enough, not cutting the ring off well enough, so on and so forth. He was winning the fight, don't get it twisted. At no point did I think that Jason Quigley was ahead. At no point after maybe the first two rounds did I think that Jason Quigley was actually going to win, to be honest with you. Certainly after the first knockdown, it looked inevitable that Belanga was going to win the fight. But again, Belanga's defense was leaky. He got caught with some big, clean, flush shots, bang on the chin, and he got rocked in the fight. Some people might have missed. In fact, let me take that back. He got buzzed in the fight because rocked implies that maybe he was rocked back on his heels or something. Not necessarily that, but there was a moment, I think it might have been in the fourth round, where Belanga came out and started the round very fast, trying to build on the momentum he had in the previous round where he scored the knockdown. And he pinned Quigley on the ropes and he was unloading shots, but then Quigley caught him flush and Belanga all of a sudden stopped punching. And I'm saying, the way I look at it, he stopped punching because he got buzzed. Yeah, because surely he would have continued punching because that's the way he was going to get Jason Quigley out of there. I mean, we saw that eventually in the 12th round. He nearly did get him out of there when he continued punching. But by the 12th round, of course, Quigley's power had deteriorated somewhat. Not that Quigley's a massive puncher, but what power he does have had lessened because of fatigue. So Belanga was able to just walk forward and attack, attack, attack in that 12th round. And after the fight, Belanga said that from here on in, he's going to start every fight the same way that he started the 12th round against Jason Quigley. He's going to fight every fight like that from the first round. Yeah, not possible because his defense doesn't allow for it and his chin doesn't allow for it. He's going to walk into something big and he's going to get hurt and he's going to get dropped or even knocked out if he tries to do that. And that's another thing about Edgar Berlanga. He doesn't come across as the sharpest tool in the box to me. When you hear a fighter talking, you hear the things that they say and the way they explain themselves and so on, and you get a sense for how smart they are, how sharp they are. Berlanga doesn't come across as very sharp to me. Not that sharp about boxing, and I don't know about stuff outside of boxing, but certainly in boxing, he doesn't come across as that sharp. Contrast that with someone like Jared Anderson, excuse me. Jared Anderson comes across as definitely more intelligent than most boxers his age. I'm not saying Jared Anderson's a genius, but listen to the guy talk. Yeah, there's he's somewhat cerebral. Yeah, I watched the video interview with Jared Anderson or a clip from an interview just the other day, and Anderson was saying that when he first met Shakur Stevenson, he didn't like him. He thought he was an idiot, and he said that they were playing a game of basketball and they didn't really know each other. This was the first time they'd met. And Jared Anderson is someone who, if he's not good at something, he doesn't really try hard because he doesn't care. He knows what his talents are. He knows which things he can excel at. But everything else, he's just, casual about it, have a bit of fun. And so they were playing this game of basketball, and he was on Shakur Stevenson's team. And Anderson, I guess, wasn't trying hard enough or, wasn't rough enough in some of these situations on the court. And Shakur Stevenson got really upset with him and started calling him, I don't know what it was, a wimp or a coward or whatever words he used. Pretty incredible, right? For someone as small as Shakur Stevenson to be talking to a big heavyweight like that. Jared Anderson could knock Stevenson out with a flick of the wrist. But it's interesting the difference in mentality. Some would say that, well, Stevenson is somebody who wants to win at everything. He's just extremely competitive and he gets upset when he doesn't win literally everything that he's trying his hand at. Again, people would see that as good because it shows the competitive spirit in him. But other people would look at that as immature and actually a waste of energy because you can't be good at everything. There are certain things you can be good at, of course, but if you try and apply the same level of energy to everything, not only can you waste energy doing that because ultimately you're going to fail in some of the things that you're trying to be good at, but also mentally, it can put you in a, let's just say, unstable state. Because if you get upset losing a boxing match, but you're a boxer, okay, cool. That's what you do. But if you then get upset because you lose a video game to your friend or lose a basketball game, that you just play with your friends and things like that, you can be in a constant state of upset. That's not good, is it? When it comes to your boxing. So, anyway, took a little detour there. I'm just saying that Jared Anderson to me comes across as a bit more mature, mentally mature, and a bit more intelligent than Edgar Berlanga. And they are a similar age. I think Jared Anderson's a couple of years younger. So yeah, Berlanga doesn't come across like the sharpest tool in the box to me. He seems to love the limelight, and that's okay. But in this day and age, loving the limelight is, flossing on Instagram, trying to get likes, taking a million videos for the gram and for Twitter and all this kind of thing, and wanting success for that more so than feeding your family. I'm sure he wants to feed his family and all that kind of thing as well. But the flossing seems to be a big part of what Edgar Berlanga is all about. So yeah, he seems like a little bit simple. That's the way I'm going to put it. Just my take on it. Maybe he'll turn out to be really deep in future and I'll have to reevaluate my perception of him. But yeah, that's what I'll say about him and that's what I'll say about the fight. Moving forward, however, obviously Canelo Alvarez has left the zone. He's signed with PBC. That would have been disappointing to Berlanga because he's wanted to fight Canelo for many years. But realistically, it's probably a blessing in disguise because Canelo would have taken care of this guy in what, a couple of rounds? Berlanga might have heart, but skills wise, he's not in the same universe as Canelo Alvarez. And I want to say Canelo probably hits harder than Berlanga too. Berlanga's naturally bigger. But from what I've seen, Canelo hits at least as hard, if not harder. And obviously, he's more accurate. He's faster, at least with hand speed, so on and so forth. So, Berlanga, I understand why he would want to fight Canelo for the money, for the glory, and all that kind of thing. If you're in it, you're supposed to be in it to win it, especially when you're an unbeaten fighter like he is. But from a boxing fan perspective, I think it's a good thing that fight didn't happen for him. So now that Canelo's gone and he's going to be tied up with PBC fights for at least the next year or so, they're talking about Berlanga fighting instead the likes of Jaime Munguia and Gennady Golovkin. I think Eddie Hearn also threw Billy Joe Saunders and John Ryder into the mix. Now, I think that the best fight of all of those for Edgar Berlanga right now is Jaime Munguia. I think that fight makes most sense for him in terms of where he's at as a fighter, as a contender. And it makes most sense for DAZN. And I think it also makes most sense for the fans, to be honest with you. I think that would produce the most entertaining fight out of all four of those opponents, or all three of those opponents. So, was it three? No, excuse me, four. But Munguia, Golovkin, Ryder, and Saunders. Yeah, four, excuse me. So, the reason I think Munguia would be the best for him, apart from I think the styles would match very well, is because Munguia isn't very good either. People tend to think of, at least some people, Munguia as being, I don't know, the heir apparent to the middleweight division or something like that. But I've been watching this guy ever since he won his first world title done at 154. At 154, he looked like a problem. But he moved up to 160 and things haven't been going well for him. He hasn't been having the impact on his opponents ever since he moved up to 160 that he had at 154. He hasn't been getting guys out. He hasn't been hurting guys as much for the most part. So let's have a look here. So, of course, he fought Liam Smith at 154, managed to get a decision there. Smith was down in the sixth round. That was a good win for him at that weight. Saddam Ali, that's the first time I saw Jaime Munguia fight. He managed to stop Saddam Ali in, what was it, 4 rounds? Yeah. So after that, he went on to fight Brandon Cook, stopped him at 154. Then he had this fight against, God, how do I pronounce that? Takeshi, excuse me, Takeshi Inoue, Japanese fighter. Now, not being funny, this guy literally looked like a Japanese bodybuilder. You know the way that people say AJ looks like a bodybuilder? No, this guy looked like a bodybuilder. He didn't look like a boxer at all. You know the way bodybuilders' physiques are very stiff and there's no suppleness to their movement or anything. And this guy had that. I mean, to the extreme. He also was one-handed. He didn't use anything but a clubbing right hand, in a way. I mean, literally, the whole fight barely threw a jab. But he had quite a bit of success against Jaime Munguia. And when I say quite a bit of success, he didn't win the fight, but there were plenty of moments when he had Munguia pinned on the ropes and he was clubbing away and landing clean and putting Munguia under pressure. So that fight, right, and that was still at 154. Then he fought Dennis Hogan at 154. Many people are of the view that Dennis Hogan got robbed and he won that fight. So Munguia's people said, okay, maybe he's struggling at the weight. Let's move him up, to the next division. Obviously, he fought Alote first, got the win there. Then he moved up, fought Spike O'Sullivan. Now, bear in mind, at middleweight, Spike O'Sullivan, I think by this time had been knocked out by, God, what's the guy's name? The French-Canadian guy. David Lemieux, excuse me. He'd been knocked out in 1 round by David Lemieux. He'd been stopped by Chris Eubank Jr. in whatever it was, 5 or 6 rounds. Jaime Munguia doesn't get him out till the 11th. Okay, so it's not looking great here for Munguia because Munguia at this point is still a slugger. They tried to change his style under Eric Morales and make him into more of a boxer puncher, but prior to that, he was really a slugger. So he goes in there, this slugger against Spike O'Sullivan, and he doesn't get him out of there until the 11th round. All right, so that's not really a good look. Terreno Johnson, he gets a cut lip. He has to retire in that fight. Camille Zerameta, I think this is when he is with Eric Morales. When he's hooked up with Morales, manages to stop him in 6. But then he goes in and fights Gabe Rosado. The Rosado fight was competitive, folks. Again, I'm not saying Rosado won the fight. He certainly didn't. But he was highly competitive in there against Jaime Munguia. At no point did I think Rosado was going to get stopped. All right, so Munguia, he's no great shakes, people. Goes in there, fights Demetrius Ballard, gets him out of there. Beats Jimmy Kelly last year. A few more stoppages. Then he goes in against Sergey Derevenchenko, his first fight at 168. And I say first fight at 168. Derevenchenko's a career middleweight. So it's 2 career middleweights fighting each other at 168. It's not like he went in there against a much bigger man. The kind of guys who he will eventually have to fight at 168 if he stays in that division. No, he fought a fellow middleweight, a fellow career middleweight. And Jaime Munguia got beaten from pillar to post in that fight. I'm not going to say it was a robbery or anything like that, but if you'd scored it for Derevenchenko, there certainly wouldn't be any complaints. You know what I mean? Because Munguia was in all sorts of trouble in this fight. Compare that to when Jamal Charlo fought Derevenchenko. Night and day performances. So, yeah, for this reason, I think that Munguia versus Berlanga is a perfectly legitimate fight. I would make Munguia the favorite. I think his level of opposition is a bit better. And Munguia appears to be tougher. I think he's got a better chin than Berlanga. Both guys have got virtually no defense at all. But, as I say, Munguia seems to take a better shot. And he's a bit more active, throws more punches. So, I'd like to see it. One of the things I should say in Berlanga's favor is he is the natural super middleweight, been at that weight his whole career. Says he's slightly taller, 6'1" on BoxRec. as opposed to Munguia, who's just 6 foot. And both guys, of course, 26 years of age. From the perspective of DAZN, why not make this fight? Both guys are on DAZN, right? So put them together, and whoever comes out on top, you can then start pushing that guy as a star. This is what the network, in my opinion, should be doing. They should be trying to move heaven and earth to make sure that they get Edgar Berlanga and Jaime Munguia in the ring. And also, both guys have got big fan bases. The Mexican fighter in Munguia against the Puerto Rican fighter in Berlanga is going to bring loads of people out to watch it. You get far more interest in that fight than you would get in Berlanga fighting Billy Joe Saunders or John Ryder. Berlanga versus Golovkin, I guess his fans would come out to watch that for sure. But Golovkin isn't exciting like he used to be. Everybody knows he's an old man. Everybody saw how comfortably Canelo beat him in their third fight. And now Golovkin just didn't have that fighting spirit anymore. So I suspect, I could be wrong, I suspect the Munguia fight between, Edgar Berlanga versus Munguia will be a bigger fight than Berlanga versus Triple G at this stage. So I think all round, that's the fight to make. Berlanga versus Munguia. I give Munguia the edge, not by much. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Edgar Berlanga beat him. And for Edgar Berlanga's development, I think this is a good fight. Obviously, it's a fight he could very easily lose. It's a fight I think he probably will lose, but it's a fight that is, not the odds are not stacked so much against him, in my mind anyway, so that he wouldn't be able to win at all. I think he would have a chance to win. And it's a fight where if he comes through a tough fight and wins, he'll become better. He'll learn so much from it. And obviously his profile will go even higher. So that's my take on it. Give me your take in the comment section below. Edgar Berlanga's win over Jason Quigley on the weekend. Are you as unimpressed by him as I am? And if so, who do you think he should fight next? Maybe you think that Jaime Munguia is a step too far for him. But at the end of the day, he's 21-0, 16 KOs. Yes, Munguia's had a lot more fights, but these Mexicans often don't have many amateur fights. So they basically learn as pros, and that's why they end up with a massive number of fights, which is kind of misleading sometimes. You're thinking that this guy's got a veteran's record, but when you go down and look at the actual bouts and the opponents, they don't really have a veteran's record, right? They've been fighting cream puffs. I mean, for maybe, I don't know, the first 15, 20 of absolute cream puffs before they step up and fight anybody with a pulse. And, even after Munguia won his first world title, he's fought plenty of cream puffs between then and now. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.